Today we're going to be talking about the law of superposition. You probably don't know what it is, so let's first off explain what it is. So the law of superposition is how old a rock is based off its layers. So like if I was in, right, so this is an example. So if I was in A, or A right here, this is the oldest layer. But then if you go all the way up to here, this is our current layer, which we are currently living on. So let's get into this, and first off, let's talk about how the law of superposition actually works. So when the magma is deep in its chamber, it's in a little chamber, and then once the convection cycle, which you know what that is, I'll explain it real quick. So the convection cycle is when it's a cycle of where the magma comes up and it either goes back down to repeat or sometimes break a hole and most likely starts a volcano. So when the magma comes up, when it breaks a volcano, which that does happen, then it stays there. And then when an eruption happens, the lava flows down and it hits the surface. So like if this is the first layer and then magma comes down and it covers over that layer and it solidates, then it becomes another layer added to that system. But there are chances of like events where if like a sandstorm happens somewhere else, or like if winds are really dusty, or there's water, it may affect it. Because like if, let's say for example, there's a wind thing, and a bunch of sand goes all the way and hits that layer. With that layer, then it's now another layer. But it always can either stay there, or there's a chance of the wind blowing it again years later, or more recent. And that part is kind of important, because if the layers keep adding, then you get to a certain point where it gets harder to like figure out what century that layer's from. But now let's get into the fossil part. So before the volcano erupts, let's say there's like an extinct animal. And with that extinct animal, when it's just walking around, and then the volcano explodes, then sediment goes right on top of the animal. What do? You're stuck. And then since it's stuck there, then the animal becomes in the form of a rock, which I've just recently learned that was actually interesting to me. So with that, then once it's covered over centuries, or over a lot of years, it becomes a part of a rock, and that's how we have fossils. And with that, it's more, and those fossils are so important for science now, because it tells us how old it is. And with that, we can do a lot more with science and tell what the Earth is. Because if we go to the very bottom layer, which is right here, and then we can see if we find a fossil from that very bottom layer, then it helps us figure out how old it is and what animals are actually alive. And that's how most scientists know what animals, or what most of the animals we had during that time period. Now, that's important because, like if scientists are trying to know what every animal was in that time period, we have to know what ways there is. That's one way to do it. There's a few other ways, but that's for another video. Now, in conclusion, I hope this helps you learn what the law of superposition is, which I'll go over it one more time, just in case you misheard or something. But it's in basics. It's the theory of how old a rock is based off its layer. So if it's deeper, then it would be older. If it's up more, it would be newer. And with this, then there's the fossil part, which if it gets covered with sediments, then it just stays there and it becomes a part of the rock. And then there's vents where like sand or dirt and stuff covers it, and that's another layer. And over time, it just keeps adding up and adding up and adding up until we're here, until we're at point, let's just say F, because we went from A to F, because it's just adding up. It doesn't add up as much now, so it's less, but the Earth is stable where it doesn't really need layers to add up, but it adds up slowly, because if you think about it, whenever volcanoes or mountains or stuff happens and it erupts and then it makes a layer, well, that's another layer. But a layer has to be covering an entire area, so it hasn't happened in a lot of years. So hopefully you learned something, and see you next time.